Get started. I'm going to call this meeting to order. I see that Mr. Williams is absent, otherwise all commissioners are present. The minutes were sent to you via your email packet. The minutes of April 21st, 2011. I will ask for approval of the minutes as mailed.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. We'll move right into our agenda for today, starting with resolution number 1243, requesting authorization for a short-term line of credit for the gas division. Do we need to say all of these, or are we going to go one at a time?
Yeah, well, we're going to have a presentation that covers 1243, 1244, and 1245, but we will ask you to vote on each of those individually, and I'll recognize Mark Walker for the presentation.
While he's coming up, 1244 is the approval of the fiscal year 2012 budget appropriations, and 1245 is requesting commitment authority for goods and services that will be paid for on or after July 1, 2012. Okay.
Commissioners, I thought I'd start out today and just provide a brief recap of our meeting last month. You will recall that in the first part of the meeting, we provided the board with a presentation on our base 5-year financial plan and also our proposed budget for fiscal year 2012. And then Julie Childers gave a presentation on our 4 infrastructure systems and the model asset replacement programs for each. And then we took a break and came back and had a workshop. And in the workshop, we reviewed some potential funding alternatives for the electric and water divisions related to adding expenditures for O&M and capital to both electric and water with respect to the Century 2 programs. And based upon the input that we received from the board during the workshop, we have gone back, we have developed some new funding scenarios for electric and water, and we will share that in full detail with the board at the June meeting. And I say that because I wanted to clarify also that the budget that you are going to consider today for fiscal year 2012 is what we term the base budget. It does not include those additional expenditures for the electric and water systems that we talked about in the workshop. And when we get to talk about funding, nor does it include those specific funding recommendations that we talked about. That will still be determined, I guess, what those funding recommendations will be. And we'll talk about that in great detail next month at the June meeting. So the proposed budget for fiscal year 2012 is $859 million. And commissioners, as you know, each of the respective utility divisions need to have their own budget appropriation in accordance with the city charter. So the 859 is broken down: electric 572 million, gas 124, water 48, and wastewater $115 million. Now, with respect to the major cost categories, starting at the far right in the total column for wholesale energy, $522 million. That's comprised of $451 million for the electric, and that goes to purchase 6 billion kilowatt hours of electric power from TVA that will resell to our electric customers next fiscal year. 71 million in purchase gas costs. That represents the purchase of 10.5 million decatherms from our various natural gas suppliers for resale to our gas customers next fiscal year. So you can see that's by far the largest component of the budget. That's actually about 61% of the $859 million. The next largest category is capital, $144 million. And you'll note that wastewater and electric are by far the largest components of the capital budget. Together they comprise about 75% of total capital for fiscal year 2012. O&M, $114 million, that represents 13% of the total budget. Debt service at $55 million, that represents 6% of the total budget request, and that represents the principal and interest on the outstanding bonds for KUB. And currently we have $742 million in outstanding bonds, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. Taxes and equivalents round out the cost categories, $24 million for fiscal year 2012. That includes $21 million in lieu of tax payments and $3 million in FICA tax expense associated with KUB labor. And that's just a summary of the proposed budget. How does the budget compare to our current year forecast for cash expenditures? You can see that approximately $37 million or 4.5% higher than the current year forecast. This chart will bear out the primary drivers for that increase. You can see for wholesale energy, up almost $16 million compared to the current year. That is solely PBA electric rates, slowly increasing over the course of this year through their monthly fuel cost adjustments. So we take the most current number and we use that as far as our budget for next fiscal year. So about $16 million for higher electric power costs next fiscal year. For capital, up $15.4 million compared to the current year. Really three major projects are driving that. One is the completion of the new electric substation located on Dale Avenue, which will serve load growth for the University of Tennessee. That's about $4 million. We'll also have the initial phase of the Alcoa Highway gas main extension project that Julie talked about in some detail last month. And that will actually go for, I believe it's about 8,000 feet of gas main, including boring under the Tennessee River and going over to approximately to where some of the UT facilities are. That's the first phase, and that'll actually be about $4.5 million in next fiscal year's budget. And then the smart grid pilot, which we've talked about in great detail from time to time. The majority of the capital for the smart grid pilot will be spent next fiscal year. That will complete the payments on smart meters, and it will also go to for the purchase and installation of the remaining communication infrastructure for reading the meters. That will occur next fiscal year as well. So that's why capital is up. And part of it is a timing difference. There's always puts and takes. You may recall from the April meeting, in the current fiscal year, our capital budget, we were about $25 million under. So there's always puts and takes. Some in that $15 million is just timing differences from the current year as well, in particular for the wastewater division. Debt service up $4.4 million. You'll recall last December we sold $112 million in bonds for the electric, wastewater, and gas divisions. Next fiscal year we'll have a full year of interest cost on those bonds. That's why that's up. And then O&M up $1.1 million or less than 1%. The higher TBA rates increase our own utility costs for running our plants, in particular our water and wastewater treatment plants, so our utility costs will be up about $500,000. And then also our OPEB trust contributions will be slightly higher. And that's a reflection of a prior period where we did a deferral and actually split a contribution over several years. Part of that hits in fiscal year 2012. And that's the reason for that increase. Any questions on that? Okay. Moving on. I did want to spend a few minutes, and I'll try and go through this fairly quickly, and talk about some of the major components, cost components of the budget, so you can basically see this is what makes up the proposed budget. We'll start with capital, again, $144 million. Approximately 90% of the capital budget will be spent directly on utility system infrastructure. And real quickly, I'll share with you some of the major projects that make up those dollars. First and foremost, PACE 10 will spend $48 million next year on PACE 10 related collection system and also plant related projects. $13 million for the Third Creek Basin alone, $10 million for compliance with the composite correction plan, which was the amendment to the CD related to the treatment plant. That will be spent next fiscal year. Electric substation projects, $9 million. Roughly half of that is the completion of that Dale Avenue substation I talked about a moment ago. We also have approximately $3 million for improvements to the Lonsdale substation. You may recall Julie talked about last month those high priority substation transformers that we need to replace. We have one for the Lonsdale substation that's part of the budget next fiscal year, and that's part of that $9 million. Water main replacement, $6 million. That'll cover approximately 10 miles of main replacement, galvanized cast iron mains for next fiscal year. Gas main replacement, 8 miles of cast iron replacement. This will keep us on target to have all the cast iron out of the gas distribution system by 2015. For MBW plant improvements, approximately $2 million. $1 million of that is for the completion of the new 4 million gallon clear well at the Marky Whitaker water treatment facility. Underground cable replacement, 7 miles of high priority electric cable underground replacement. $2 million for that. $2 million approximately also for the replacement of 1,300 wood poles next fiscal year. So many of these projects you can see were talked about as part of the whole asset management presentation. We're not going quite to the level for electric and water, and again, we'll talk about that in more detail in June. Any questions on capital? O&M, $114 million. I just really want to touch upon, as is typically the case, over 50% of the O&M budget is labor-related expenditures. In particular, $41 million for O&M payroll. Our total payroll for fiscal year 2012 will be $55 million, $14 million capital, $41 million O&M. Now, with respect to our staffing, we plan to end the year with about 895 full-time employees. That's what we're on track for. Our plan is through attrition to reduce that over the course of the next fiscal year down to 875 full-time employees. So just a reminder, that is our target level for June of 2012. Other labor-related expenses for active employees, healthcare costs about $8 million next fiscal year. That's a slight increase over the current year. We'll also have $3 million in contributions to our pension trust fund, $2 million for the OPEB trust fund, $5 million in retiree medical claims for next fiscal year as well. And that sort of rounds out all the labor-related expenses. In addition, we'll spend $7 million for utilities. The majority of that is electric power to run the water and wastewater treatment facilities. So that comprises a decent part of our O&M budget. In addition, stock materials, $4 million. $1 million of that is fuel for our fleet, and the other $3 million is various materials for utility system maintenance, primarily for the electric system as well. And then $2 million for chemicals to treat water and wastewater. And those are some of the major components of the proposed O&M budget. With respect to debt service, $55 million. As I mentioned, we have $742 million in outstanding bonds right now. $400 million of that is for the wastewater division. So you can see by the pie chart on the left that wastewater makes up almost 50% of the total debt service budget for next fiscal year. And those bonds will mature over the years 2012 through 2045, looking at that whole $742 million. But the $55 million, again, about $21 million of that is principal, $34 million is interest on the outstanding debt. With respect to taxes and tax equivalents, $24 million. Again, $21 million of that is for in lieu of tax payments to the various taxing jurisdictions in which our systems operate. Of that $21 million, $13 million to the city of Knoxville, $7 million to Knox County, and about $1 million to other counties in which our electric system operates. And then rounding out that budget, FICA tax expense, about $3 million. Excuse me. And just to note some of the differences, tax equivalents are expected to be up around $500,000, simply reflects the system infrastructure investments we made during the current year. FICA tax expense will be down $300,000, a reflection of the expected decrease in staffing in fiscal year 2012. But in total, $24 million for tax equivalents. Commissioners, now looking at the funding recommendation that we do have before you today. It is in Resolution 1243, the authorization to issue a line of credit or revenue anticipation note for the gas division. This is a standard financing tool that we bring to the board this time every year, and it allows us to manage the seasonality of cash flow for the gas division for next fiscal year. And it is in compliance with state law, and I have a chart here in just a moment that will give you a few more details on the line of credit. But also, as I talked about at the outset, we do have additional funding recommendations, in particular for the water division and the electric division, that we will share in more detail at the June board meeting and try to come to some consensus on what those will be. Those will be brought back to the board for official action probably later in the summer, along with an additional appropriations request for whatever expenditures that we agree upon we want to add to the plan. And just a couple of key highlights of the gas line of credit. Again, up to $20 million. State law requires that it can only be a one-year maturity on the revenue anticipation note. So whatever we draw down, we will have to pay back by the end of fiscal year 2012. Though it's not required by state law, as always, we will competitively bid that among local banks and award it to the bid that results in the lowest true interest cost to KUB. And then before we can issue an RFP for that, we will need to get the approval of the state comptroller. And again, that's in compliance with state law. And just to close out talking about budget appropriations for the year, just a graphical representation of how the budget will be funded. You can see we anticipate $774 million in revenues for fiscal year 2012. Almost all of that $774 million will go to fund the proposed budget. There's about $6 million that will actually go to general fund cash, and I believe that's in the water division, which that will occur. But of those revenues, $53 million will go to fund the capital program. But you can see we have other sources of capital funding as well, including bond proceeds and existing general fund cash. I will point out $48 million in bond proceeds. Of that $112 million that we issued last November or December, we still have $33 million at the end of the fiscal year to draw down and use to fund capital projects. And that's why that number is a little bit higher than what you would expect. Any questions on the budget? I'll move on real quickly to commitment appropriations. Commissioners, this time of year, as we request budget appropriations, we also request commitment appropriations for the upcoming fiscal year. This allows us to enter into contracts next fiscal year that commit KUB to expenditures beyond the fiscal year. This was beyond fiscal year 2012. The total amount we're requesting is $48.6 million, and you can see from the chart that the majority of that is in the electric division and also the wastewater division. And just some of the key projects that support the need for the commitment appropriations. One is the construction of a new electric in-feed substation in East Knoxville. Another is the future phases of the Alcoa Highway gas extension project. Phase 1 will be next year, but there are future phases on that as well. So potentially that could be contracted out over the course of next fiscal year. And then we have the design phase of the new low service pump station at the Darby Whitaker water plant as well. And then we have some water main replacement projects and paste dam projects as well that are required for the commitment appropriations. And then in closing, just to quickly review the resolutions, excuse me, 1243 is for the gas line of credit, 1244 is for budget appropriations, and 1245 is for the commitment appropriations. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
On capital for the gas, it looks like there's capital is $20 million.
That is correct.
And you have $8 million of projects. They were big projects, look like in the appropriation. What's the balance? Is that just more of the same, smaller?
For the gas division, we have the Alcoa Highway project, which is the biggest project. You have some for the addition of customers as well. Not a whole lot, but some for the addition of customers. You have also a new regulator station that will be our city gate station that will be installed on Topside Road. That's a portion of the gas capital budget also. And then you have shared capital that all divisions have. For example, gas will have a portion of the smart grid pilot because of the gas meters that are being installed. And then also just the asset management program, the new IT program.
But we're going to have all those saddles replaced. It's not in that.
That is correct. They will be replaced in June. That is correct.
Thank you.